Right. All right, okay. Hello, everybody. We are here today. It is Tuesday, April the 18th, 5 p.m. here in Finland, Central Finland. To give everybody a little bit of the context, my name is Jesse Ortega. I am a assistant professor at Queen's University Belfast, and today I am here in Finland, specifically at the University of Jyväskylä as a visiting uh, scholar, visiting uh, whatever we call it, visiting person, trying to learn a little bit more about the ways folks do things here in terms of education, in terms of culture, learning experiences, etc. So we can actually exchange all of this information. So I am happy because I've been learning a lot about the culture, about education as well. And I had the pleasure to learn different folks around the lines of these places as well. And thank you for the invitation today. I have invited Hannah and Sana and Pivy who work at this institution so they can share some of the knowledges that they have related to the education system here in Finland. And I'm going to pretend that I don't know anything, but also because I really don't know much about the education system in general here in Finland. And the three of them here have different types of experiences, both at a personal level and also at a professional level. You're at the university. And some of you have your children in the education system, so obviously you know more about it. And here we are today. This is Capsulxs number 3. And just for everybody to know, Capsulas it's like a live stream that I have decided to create to leverage or to democratize the knowledge production, knowledge sharing around the world by inviting different folks here to learn from them and learn from each other. So that's what we're trying to do today. So perhaps what we're gonna do in this moment is try to introduce ourselves so all the folks who are out there know who you are and perhaps share a little bit about your experiences or anything that you want to share with us. So, with that being said, we're going to start with Sana. Let's start with you first. Tell us a little bit about you, the work that you do, anything that you want to share with us.
Right. Hello, everyone. My name is Sanna Riuttanen. I'm a doctoral researcher and also I work as a project researcher at the Center for Applied Language Studies at the University of Jyväskylä. I'm currently writing my doctoral dissertation, and the topic is the identities and language learning of adult migrants in adult basic education in Finland. Not going to go deeper into that because not everyone will be familiar with language education, so I will just move on to I have worked in many projects at the university since 2018. Currently, I also work for a national network for language education policies, so most of my knowledge comes from there. I also have personal experience from Finnish school. I've done the whole thing from pre-primary education all the way to now university. And yeah, obviously I'm very interested in these topics through my research also, which is among adult migrants who are in basic education here. And what else?
That's it. We're going to share as much as everybody wants to share. Okay, now let's go with Hannah. I know your name says on the screen, Johanna, but maybe you want to share with us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do here at the university.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. I go by Hannah. I'm an associate professor of English at the Language and Communication Studies department here at the University of Jyväskylä. I'm a teacher educator, a researcher, currently mostly focused on epistemic justice in an adult basic education context. So kind of thinking about whose knowledge is count and who decides and how is that negotiated and resisted in a school context. I'm also doing a little bit of research on academic well-being or unwell-being, and that again has also something to do with like finding humanizing, community-oriented ways of being an academic. So it's also a lot of unlearning of Eurocentric and so-called Western ways of doing academia. So that's also another focus. And, you know, as a teacher, educator, and language person, things like culturally sustaining pedagogies, linguistically sustaining pedagogies are just kind of on the table a lot anyway. So those are also things I'm really interested in. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting work.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I will say that today I will also speak as a mom. I think I have 3 kids, and I have not gone through Finnish education. I will say that right away as a disclaimer. So I have only, I don't know if mom is a secondhand experience, but like that's where most of my most direct experience with schooling at the moment comes from my kids.
Yes, thank you for saying that, because I actually wanted to point out that in this exercise that I'm trying to do with Capsulxs, it's about welcoming anybody's experiences and learning experiences. And I'm happy that you actually say that I'm coming with also this positionality as a mother, as a family member as well. And we want to send a message to folks out there that as in this pursuit of, as you mentioned, epistemic justice, is everybody's welcome in these spaces, also the knowledges of our children and your children as well, you know, in these conversations. So thank you for saying that. Okay, and the last person, but not the least, Päivi.
Hello, everyone. I'm Päivi Ikkanen, and I also work at the University of Jyväskylä at the Department of Language and Communication Studies, the same one as Anna. I'm currently a postdoctoral researcher. I defended my PhD more than 2 years ago, and I've been studying migrants in Finland and how English facilitates integration in Finnish society, or whether it does. And apparently it does to a great deal, because information is much more readily available in English if you don't have a high proficiency in Finnish yet. As for my background, I was born and raised in Finland, so I've also gone through the Finnish school system, but a slightly longer time ago than Sanna. She has more recent experience from that, I think. And just like Hanna, I also speak as a mother. The school system has changed quite a bit since my days, I've noticed when watching him. My current postdoctoral research focuses on mentoring programs that are aimed at highly educated migrants and designed to facilitate job seeking in Finland. And I think that's it for now. Let's continue with some more details.
Exactly. No, thank you so much. That was a great opener for our folks out there to know who we are and where we're coming from and what are we hoping to do in today's conversation, which is about education and the education system, or your experiences with the education system in Canada. So the first thing that a lot of the people out there don't necessarily know is, what does the education system look like? And what I need is, how is it? Is it like 11 grades, 12 grades, only 9 grades? Sort of like the overarching perspective. Like, I'm going to give you an example, and then you let me know how does this work in Canada, for example, so in Finland. So to give you an example, in different contexts, you have primary school, you have secondary, then you have high school. Then some high schools are 10, 11, and 12th grade in some countries. In some other countries, they only have 10 and 11 grade plus an extra grade before going to undergraduate education and then postgraduate education, etc., etc. So I wonder if any of you can help us to paint a little picture of how is in general terms, how is the system here in terms of, is there any kindergarten? Is there any younger education? How does this work roughly, so we all know when we start from that?
Yeah, I could tell you like a really short summary, and then if there's more you want to know, you can ask. So you go to school the year you turn 7, but before that, you have 1 year of pre-primary education. And even before that, you can go to kindergarten. So sort of pre-primary is a sort of year between kindergarten and compulsory school. And then you turn 7, you go to compulsory school, also called comprehensive school. And that one lasts from the age of 7 to age of 16. So that's 9 years. And it used to be so that after this comprehensive school, you could just stop there and, get a job or whatever. But since 2021, they actually imposed a new policy, which is that you have to study something until you are 18. So then after comprehensive school, you can choose between 2 paths. Either you go to general upper secondary school, which is more general, or then you go to vocational school, which is to learn a profession. And so now, since 2021, you basically have to go to one of these. And then supposedly there are no dead ends and there are no bottlenecks in our education system. So whichever path you choose, you can then, after those, you can go to university, or you can go to a University of Applied Sciences. There are more traditional sort of paths, so that from vocational school you would go to University of Applied Sciences, so that you could learn a profession and then sort of learn more about that same profession in a University of Applied Sciences. But you can also sort of mix these. You don't have to take linear paths necessarily. And yeah, so one is a more general knowledge type of path, and then one is the vocational path.
I'm glad that you're saying that it doesn't have to take a linear path. That's one good thing that I want to hear more in a moment. But maybe perhaps you want to give us one example of what do you mean by vocational and what do you mean by university? Are there any differences, or is it the same?
Yeah, so the difference between universities and then Universities of Applied Sciences is just basically what you can study there. So for example, I don't know, maybe you two know better, but at least if you are becoming, for example, an engineer, then you usually go to a University of Applied Sciences.
Okay.
That's where you can study engineering. But then, for example, the humanities, you study at the university, or to become a doctor, you go to university and not University of Applied Sciences. So they have different focuses in terms of.
And vocational, would that be if I want to become a plumber or a construction, or work with the woods, or a hairstylist, I assume. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And also you can become, for example, a nurse in vocational school, but then to become a registered nurse, you then continue that in the University of Applied Sciences to become a more specialized nurse.
Right. So does it mean when the kids, I guess the teenagers, whatever, they finish and they decide, okay, where should I go? Should I go to the sort of University of Applied Sciences, or should I go to the vocational? And then they get to choose which one of the 2 paths, but also they can stop and move from one to the other if they choose to, right?
Technically, yes.
Yes.
Do you want to add something, baby?
No, I was just saying that that's what it is, and well, each person has their preferences, and I guess many people go to high school if they're not sure of what they want to become when they grow up as well. It's a way of buying more time to think about what you wish to do when you grow up.
Yeah.
And also there are some entrance exams and things like that, but mostly it's about choosing what you want, finding your own path.
I know Hannah wanted to say something.
Yeah, I think I see a lot of room for improvement as well. But one of the things that as a mom, I like about this is the ages that Sanna just mentioned. So my first two kids were born in the US, and we moved away from there when the oldest one turned 5. So for him, school would have started, but moving to Finland, where school starts at age 7, gave him 2 more years of kindergarten, as we call it here. So so that was kind of nice for him, I think, for all of us also. So I like that kids start relatively late, also in comparison to other European countries. And then I really like this, or I'm also like, I find really comfort in the fact that they changed that law, and so that you have to go to school not until you hit a certain grade, but until you hit a certain age. Because what happens if you just hit a certain grade is that you still have you're still relatively young at 16. I didn't know what I was going to do with my life at 16. So just this idea that my kids will be in some sort of school until they're 18, I find that really comforting.
Nice.
So
Now,
that's
this is really good to know that. One thing that I wanted to ask, and at this point, it could be Eddie, Sana, or Paivi, or you, Hannah. I like the idea of like you finish your these kids, and then you, as you mentioned, sometimes they don't know what they want, but they figure it out, and they get to choose their own path, and then finally they choose either or. So I wonder if culturally here in Finland there is a push for these kids to go through university or vocational, and then a vocational trade, so to speak, are looked down, and everybody's looking up at the applied sciences. Let me give you an example. In some of the countries that I've been working with in the past is this idea that the kids finish high school and then you have to go to university to become, as you mentioned, a lawyer, an engineer, a doctor. All of these big massive things. That's the way to become a person, get money, and an important person, so to speak. And then sort of is looked down somehow when you go into the trades, and then you want to go and study a couple of years on a diploma or a certificate on nursing certificate, or let's say stylist or hotel management. So all of those social things are looked down, and most of them, and most of the time in these countries of the quote unquote global south, the people from the lower classes are the ones who actually go into these vocational things, and those who are in middle upper class are the ones who actually go into the universities. So my question is, does this happen here? Yes or no? Or maybe it's a little bit of both, but I wonder if looks like Sana wants to say.
Yes, Sid, your mic is not working too well. I think when you lean forward, it's a bit better. But can you say the, yeah, if you say the last sentence again, I think.
No, the last sentence that I want to say, does this idea also work in this particular context? That some, like I was giving the example of countries, the global south, that unfortunately the folks who are in the lower socioeconomic status ended up going to the trade or vocational, and those who are in the upper class, they go to the universities to get studied as lawyers or engineers, etc. So my question to any of you is, does this also happen here in this context in Finland, or no? How does that work?
I think you're asking if there's a difference in prestige. Yeah. So I think so. I mean, I must say I'm not aware of any research on that, but I think from what you was from like popular discourse, if I can assess it from where I stand, I would say yes, there is definitely a hierarchy between, for example, universities of applied sciences and universities, or real universities, if you want to. Yeah. So, like, why do we have that? Would be a good question to ask. Why do we need to have 2 different tracks?
And what do you think? Why do we have 2 different?
I think it has historical reasons. I don't think we need it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think we could just
of applied sciences are kind of new still to the higher education scene. It's maybe about 10 years, 15 that they were first established. So they haven't been around for that long. And yeah, they're more practically oriented in many ways. They want to raise their profile too. But as to the prestige question, I think they've done surveys on university students to see from what kind of families they come. I can't remember the percentages now, but it's at least 80 or maybe even 90% of university students that come from middle class or upper class families.
Yeah.
And not working class families. But I'm a living exception of that it does actually happen, but it's not as common.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it would be perhaps financially more clever to have a blue collar job, because you might end up working or making more money by that, doing that.
Mm.
And on the topic of who pays what, like if a student decides to go to the trades or the vocational ones, or the University of Applied Sciences, do they need to pay any money to get into these places, either or?
No.
No, in theory, all education is free in Finland for Finnish
Yeah.
persons.
That's the thing.
And I would say probably if you go to this high school that we're calling it, or general school, at least before it used to be quite expensive to buy all the books and stuff. But you don't have to pay like a tuition. But I think maybe they changed something and now it's all online anyway. So now it might actually be like free.
They did change that, and it is free now. Like I don't even buy one pencil for my kids anymore.
Yeah.
They're not going to use it because they get one from the teacher. but that being said, so for example, our international students at the university, they do pay. It's not very much, and I have to say I would have to look it up what exactly the numbers are. But it's still like you also like for somebody who doesn't have any income, you know, it's still something that needs to be taken into consideration sometimes, and something that selects people.
Right.
So,
Right. So for Finns and perhaps those who live here, it's free education. But if you are planning to come from another country, maybe from Europe or from other countries, then you will have to pay if you want to go either to vocational or the applied sciences, I guess. And it's still not that expensive. Do you think it would be still expensive if somebody from India, somebody from Ecuador, somebody from South Africa want to come here? Do they feel that it's still expensive if they want to pursue any study?
well, I think it's still, Finland is not a cheap country to live in.
Okay.
No.
So, I mean, sorry.
Even if education wasn't that expensive, it's the living costs that may also be an obstacle.
Okay. But you wanted to say something.
No, I think that's it. Like, I think maybe Jyväskylä is not the most expensive city. It's in central Finland. It's not a big metropolis.
Yeah.
But I think living and eating and paying rent in Helsinki, for example, is.
Yeah. No, I see what you mean. Like, even if international students decide to come here to study, then it's not about necessarily the fees, but the cost of living here that would probably eat up some of the funds that they would bring here. And great, though. Well, this is good. Start talking about the education system, but we were also talking about the other day about the sort of benefits being in the public schools, because it looks like here everything is public schools. There are not many private schools, like secondary schools or high schools that are private that I'm aware of, or if there are, what are these type of private schools that you can if you know any? Why is it that there are private schools here? What are the reasons why they exist?
There are specific pedagogy, for example, Steiner pedagogy, that has comprehensive school, which you have to pay for, but that's of course optional for any parent to choose. And they have quite different teaching methods than what parents may prefer to put their children there. But other than that, some vocation.
And some language programs, but I'm not sure if those cost money or if those are just like you have to apply.
No, it's just that they have an exam. So the language focused, the music focused, and the sports focused, they just select students by exam.
But it's still in the
But those are not private.
But that's what I was thinking. Like these other things that you mentioned, music and the languages are still in the public school, I guess, right?
But then there are some vocational schools like hairdressing or massage therapy or something like that that are organized privately, but they have public versions of those.
Mm-hmm. I think for the understanding of public and private is that these terms mean a bit different things in Finland than, for example, in the US context, where a private school is really funded through not the state, but not through tax money, but something else, and usually really expensive. Whereas in Finland, even the so-called private schools are mostly state subsidized and also need to follow more or less so now remind me, Sanna and Päivi, how does it work? They don't need to follow the national curriculum like in detail, but there are still some guidelines, like they can't just do whatever they want, right? How does it work? I mean, they have also some regulations. I'm not entirely sure.
No, I'm pretty sure that they have to follow the curriculum.
Yeah, they can. I think they have the curriculum. That's basically the same for everybody. And then they can like add some like focus, for example, special music groups or so, or special sports, more sport or more, I don't know, whatever. But again, I'm not sure those are actually private. They're just.
So there is not much private education here, I can tell. And the reason why I'm asking this question about the private versus the public is because obviously in many countries, again, from the global south, you have the public education. And I'm going to give you the example of Colombia because that's where I'm more close to. And then you have public education for sure. The students don't need to pay any fees at all in this public education. And so in some private and public universities also, they need to pay it some money, but not that high. However, on the other end, there are the private ones. And they exist because there is the idea that public education is bad education, and then the private education existed because they want the best education for them. And this works in two levels that I am aware of. One level is the elite private schools, which are obviously for the middle upper class in the country, which are bilingual or multilingual schools or English medium schools, in which those are the from middle and upper class pay private schools because they want the best of the best. And then on the other hand, we have the private schools within the middle lower working class, because also they believe that the public education is not that good. Therefore, it's better to pay a little money more in a private school that they get more than what they get in the public school. Because, for example, in the public school, you get 40 to 50 students in one classroom. Whereas if you pay this little money in the private school at the corner of your neighborhood, then you will get probably 10 or 15 in one classroom. So better education for them. But it looks to me, these conversations and what I have learned so far in the last couple of weeks is that this idea does not necessarily exist, because it looks like the public education system in Finland works in a good way, in a good way, that there is no need for somebody or institutions or people out there to say, oh, we don't like the education system, we're going to build our own school. And then for those who are disappointed or don't like the public education, come here, pay some money, and then come to the seat school, for example. or something like that. Just like this doesn't exist, because if the education works and makes sense, well, what's the point of being paying hundreds of thousands of euros to go to Jesuit school when the public works well and has been working well for a while?
I wouldn't say that, yeah, that idea doesn't exist as such, but there is still like some sort of area segregation happening nowadays in Finland, because it used to be so, I think, that you would have to put your kids to the school which is closest to you. But now, some parents are wanting to put their kids in some other comprehensive schools because of like aerial developments, some poor areas and stuff like that and stuff. So there is some of that happening.
And that happening because
Nowadays.
there is this perception that the school in this particular area is less good, and the other school in this other particular area is way better. And then I move my kids towards this area because it's better.
Yeah.
Is that
At least in the Helsinki area. Maybe not so much here yet in our city. I haven't heard about it, at least.
We don't even have that much choice.
Not much choice, no. So usually in these smaller cities, like also where I live, you get assigned a school you can pick. And also, I think it wouldn't make a big difference. Well, if you could pick, it would just not, like even if I could pick, I would not pick differently because it's more or less the same anyway. But it's true that gentrification is happening and segregation is happening in the bigger cities as well. And I think that's why it would be important to keep private schools out of the system, or keep the numbers really small, or actually, restrict them or ban them completely, because I think that just leads to segregation. So there is also some worrying trends in Finland that show that if there is a possibility for wealthier families to provide a more expensive school experience for the children, they will do that. And so upper and middle class families just self-segregate automatically if there is an opportunity. So there shouldn't just be an opportunity, I think.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Like there's a potential that the more diverse these communities and these cities become, the more self-segregated they become, I guess, in a sense. Oh my God, there's the folks coming from other countries. We don't want to be with them. We want to move it over here where we can have our schools over here, and so they can have their own public schools, and we have our own public schools over here that are quote unquote better.
It's of course then also a bit more complicated. I think there's many reasons why caregivers choose schools, and it's Sonja Kosunen has done really great work on this. So it's there's many factors, but that's definitely one. I think it also is an interesting question. How do you even know what's a good school, right? Because we don't have any, until recently at least, we didn't have any school rankings. So how would you even know? And that's of course a really interesting question in Finland, because
well, there is the assumption in the global south is that you don't need that kind of ranking or that measurement, because at least in the global south, the perception is you guys are so good, everything is so good that you don't need that measurement because everything works, everything's good already. So there's no point in measuring something that we're good already. I mean, that's the sentiment that we hear from the south, and because you are so good, we want to be like you, meaning like the global north, meaning the education system. So
for me, when I hear this, the question would not be is this true or not, but my question would be who has a vested interest in spreading this kind of discourse, and where did you hear that, and who says that, and why? And so it's not so much a question of like me worrying that this might be true or not true, but it's more about like who gains from this discourse that Finland is such a model, and how does it even how does it come into existence, and who promotes it and who spreads it?
right? And that's a good question that I'm gonna pose it for the audience out there to think about who, what, when. I have an answer that I'm gonna pose it here for us to discuss for the next few minutes. Is um, not a who, but it's a system, right? It's not a specific person that we can point at. You did this, but it's a system that has been in society for so long, at least since colonization, sending the message out there that there are some that are here and then some are at the bottom, right? And then those at the bottom of society always have to be like those ones at the top, right? Like when the Spanish people came to the American continent, they saw the indigenous people, and then the first thing that they thought is, oh my God, look at these savages. And look at these languages that are speaking is the languages of the savages. So we need to educate them in the way that we are, because we are humans and we are subhumans. And then everything started doing, erasing their knowledges and their ways of being and their ways of knowing, and imposing this other knowledge that came with that colonization part, right? And then what happens is the other ones started, understanding, okay, I guess it looks like those ways of being and knowing that were brought to us, it looks like they are better than us. We started sort of thinking and adopting and adapting those ideologies or those mindsets that for a lot of people they call it colonial mentality or self-colonization, so to speak, that we to this day we still have it, thinking that I want to be like those over there. So just to answer really quick your question, where is this coming from? And then the question is, the governments perpetuate this idea by saying in different countries of the global south, we are going to follow the Finnish education system because that's the best. And they bring it, they put it up in their countries and say, we're gonna follow what they're saying. They will follow what they're doing. And I find it problematic because that's not looking at their own societies as well. And I know there are some countries that have already been working towards looking more at their own countries rather than looking outside. And that's a good way to go about, like a good way to look at us in the countries. How can we do things that respond to the needs in this particular country rather than to imitate or mirror the others, because this perception that what is outside is better. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It absolutely does make sense. I think that's really a profound analysis. I think from the other perspective, I can say that, of course, Finland also benefits from these discourses economically, for example. I mean, there's people who have built careers on this idea that Finland has this amazing education system, and we can sell curricula and we can sell books and we can sell, and that's okay. I mean, I'm not like trying to finger point at individuals here, but I think it's just a very common discourse that, as you say, that is kind of there's a happy buyer and there's a happy seller, and of course at some point they meet and they make business, right? And they sell this discourse, and I think actually at this point I'm going to do a shameless self-promotion and say that there is actually a book that's open access and freely available, and it just came out, and it's called Finland's Famous Education System: Unvarnished Insights into Finnish Schooling. It's came out with Springer, and it's doing exactly the opposite. It's trying to kind of challenge that discourse, or add at least nuance to it, but also like kind of saying that.
Thank you for bringing that up. So as you know,
free to download it.
Get the book. That book is free to download. So if you want to get more in the nitty gritty of these discussions about what it is and what it's not, and as you mentioned, it's more nuanced than that, because that's what I learned now that I'm here. It's been a few weeks now, but I've been learning a lot of things that when I was back in Colombia, I didn't understand. I was like, why is it that all of these, we want to be so badly like the North and the Scandinavian countries, we want to be like this so badly, but it's, as you mentioned, it's more complex than that, more nuanced than that, and it requires a lot of analysis and a lot of thought about the processes and the historical processes through the many years of why we are at the moment this type of thing. So moving on into a couple more ideas that I wanted to share or ask you, because all of you have been in the education system at a different levels, like either you have been part of that or just recently came to the system. Is there anything that any of you want to share in terms of any personal experience within the system, anecdote, memories, things that you learned, things that you appreciate about the system? I'm gonna give you one example. I appreciate the food that is provided in the system. I really love it. It's very healthy. I couldn't be any healthier before. I love that. So that's my appreciation of the system. Does anybody of you want to share any anecdote, memory, things that you learn or appreciate of the system?
Yeah, I guess the free schooling in general is a real asset, and including lunch. I mean, school lunch is free. And the democratic ideal in a way that it's the same for everybody. And teachers treat students in such a way that they try to keep everyone aboard, and I really appreciate that. What
What are your thoughts on this question that we're looking right now? Any memories, things that you learn, and the anecdotes, and things that you appreciate about the system?
I will second the food. As a mom, it's really great to know that when kids come home, they have had at least one meal that was probably relatively healthy, or at least not outrageously unhealthy. I also know when they come home from school that they have had lots of outside time or outdoors time. So my kids, the way that school day is structured is it's always 45 minutes of learning and then, or learning, I don't know, but lesson anyway, and then 15 minutes of outside time. And I think that's more or less the same everywhere. And so I know when they come home, they have had a meal, they've been outside a lot, and I usually also know that they have very little homework, although it could be less sometimes, I think. But like, I don't know, especially in the lower grades, I don't know, very, very little. So I think now I have a 5th grader and a 3rd grader, but I think most of the homework can be done in like 5 to 10 minutes, I would say. So that's okay.
Good. Nice. Sana, is there anything that you want to share with us in this respect?
Well, I also want to second that. I really liked school always, and I really love the fact that there's food, which is, sometimes Finnish people are kind of ungrateful of the food. They're like, it's not that good, but it's, at least in my schooling experience, like 99% of the kids, they actually do eat the food, and they don't like go to the shop and buy something else, even though they could. So yeah, and I also think that it's great that there's like pretty short school days for young kids. Like, even you go to school when you're 7, and then maybe you have like half days in the beginning, like you get home at 12 and stuff like that. So it's not, I think there's an appreciation for stuff that you can learn outside of school, like social relationships and stuff like that. So you have time for those when you are younger, before the grind that is high school.
Yeah, and they also have subjects like sports and arts and music. So it's not only books and writing and reading.
Nice. Yeah, that's one of the things that I liked a lot here is that the outdoors, being able to go out and walk and be in the nature, in the lake, all of those things have made me feel good. Like the food plus the outdoors, so far so good.
Yeah, but I also will say that all our kids and all of us are also white European families. So we are probably seeing this very positive image of Finnish schooling. And I think there's very different stories. And I know that in our research, we actually talk about very different sides of the picture. So.
And what is it? Tell us a little bit about, because I know you're conducting research. So let us a little bit of the highlights of that. Because we are speaking from your perspective. Is there any highlights of within your research that the others are saying about in general the system that you want to share with us?
So you want to hear the downsides? Is that correct?
Yeah, sure.
Well, I think a lot of the pedagogies that I have seen are not like, I would say, pedagogically, it's often a very safe in the sense of maybe not super courageous, the pedagogy. So it's often very teacher-centered, textbook-centered, which can, for some groups of students, also be fine. But I think it's also a lot, and also that's a dominant form of how education is performed, as like book and teacher-centered. I think there's also a certain hesitation around topics that maybe white European people would call sensitive topics. So talking about all forms of discrimination and exclusion, racism, sexism, maybe gender is a relatively easy topic to talk about still, but that is, I think, still difficult. And I think a lot of teachers also feel unprepared to talk about this, but that's on us again. Like, so I'm not trying to say like, oh, bad teachers, you don't talk about race stuff enough, but I think it's also on us teacher educators to change that and yeah, make them comfortable raising these issues.
And on the topic of, I have a couple more questions before we wrap up today. And then one of those two questions is about language and language education, because the reason why we are all together today is because I met you at the BAL conference, the British Applied Linguistics Conference, because we all share similar work around the lines of language education, language research, etc., etc. So we're in Finland. Obviously, everybody speaks Finnish. And the schools are in they teach in Finnish. But I wonder if any of you want to say something about, is there any teaching of other languages, like foreign languages? Do you see it more like as a second language, as a foreign language, as an international language, home languages? What is any comments that you know that happens here? So I would say Finnish is the first language, and I would also say, based on my ignorance, Swedish is the second language because it's the neighbors, or Russian is the second language that people might want to learn because it's the other neighbor on the other end. Then we have Estonian on the other, that could be another language that you might want to learn. But this is just me thinking, okay, you have neighbors here, so these are the languages that you might want to learn in high school, for example. But I don't know. So does anybody want to help us to know how does this work over here?
Okay, first of all, Finland has two official languages, Finnish and Swedish. The Swedes are a minority of Swedish-speaking Finns, I should say. I guess it's about 5% of it. And as for foreign language learning, Finnish children and adults also learn a lot of foreign languages. Children start on the first grade as of 2021 with their first foreign language. There might be some choice, but it turned out that most schools start with English, which people don't probably think is the best idea. The original idea was to introduce a language other than English, such as German, French, Chinese, Spanish, whatnot. But in practice, it's been English most of the time because of financial reasons and teacher qualifications, availability, other structural restraints like that. But nevertheless, they start with the first foreign language on the first grade. And then as of fourth grade, they may choose an optional language if they wish to do so. This is not compulsory. But then the path continues. On the 6th grade, Finnish speaking children start with Swedish, and the Swedish speaking ones start with Finnish if they haven't started it earlier in the school years. So this is a rather recent change. It used to be from the 7th grade onwards, but now they moved it to the 6th. And then from 8th grade on, you know, also let's start another optional. But this again is not. There are many other things you can choose at that point. Before the upper part of the higher part of the comprehensive school. It's from 1 to 6 is the primary school, 7 to 9 higher part. And then in high school, you can again learn other languages. So that's for the children and young people, but then there are also civic institutes or liberal adult education centers where anyone can learn new languages.
What are the most,
universities and universities of applied sciences?
like in all of these that you have mentioned, sorry to interrupt,
Okay.
what are the most popular languages that people tend to learn after they learn obviously Finnish and maybe Swedish? Or those are international languages or other languages besides English, what are the popular, what people are trying to learn these days?
Yeah, English is the most popular by far because it's become like there's even a study completed here at our university some time ago already, but they labeled English as the third national language, which kind of holds true, and it's sort of perceived as a general working life skill, more or less today, because most jobs require some sort of English skills, and there's no vocabulary, knowledge building, and things like that require foreign language skills, which usually means English in Finland. But traditionally, Finns used to learn a lot of German. It's gone down now, but it's still rather popular. French, Spanish is on the rise.
Nice. Yeah.
Japanese is very popular. Chinese, maybe not so much now, but it's been on the rise as well. But it's mostly European languages and Spanish that
Right.
are popular.
Right.
Russian has declined for obvious reasons nowadays, but on the eastern part of Finland, it's been very popular to learn Russian because there's lots of trade and things that they need to conduct.
Interesting. All right. Thank you so much for guiding us through this process of understanding the languages that are here. And I don't know if any of you wants to sort of answer the question about the languages of immigrants or refugees or asylum seekers in Finland. Is what is going on with that? Are you aware? Do you know anything? Do they teach them? Are they welcome in the classrooms? The languages?
All children are entitled to learn their first language. But in practice, it often boils down to how many children there are from a specific language background. Because group size has to be a specific number of students that they organize teaching in home languages or heritage languages.
How many children are in each classroom roughly on a
It
regular
depends on
basis?
the municipality, but here, for example, it's 12.
12 students in a classroom.
Mhm.
And this is a public school.
Yeah.
Wow. My friends in the Global South would be happy to be here.
Or I'm not exactly sure if it's different for the heritage language classroom.
Right.
It might be lower for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's interesting to know. Yeah, no, thank you so much. I think the last question that I have for us today is it has to do with the popular myth or popular idea that Finland is the happiest country on this planet. And I always wonder what that means. And I'll tell you a little bit of a background of why my question, because as Colombians and Latin Americans that I know and places that I've been, we're all happy. If you see us, we're happy all around, regardless of what's happening. We're just happy people and friendly people all the time. So it got me thinking, why is it that, I mean, Finland gets to be the number one according to media and according to rankings that are out there, right? That you can Google it and why not? And then it is the happiest one. And then I did a little bit of digging into the why this is the thing. And then according to this, the World Population Review, the Finland is the happiest one in terms of like, economic reasons, social reasons, educational reasons. And obviously, when the folks here have the real have jobs and have education, then don't necessarily have to worry much about whether I'm gonna eat tomorrow or not, or whether I'm gonna get a job tomorrow, or whether I'm gonna be mugged in the streets tomorrow, or even killed tomorrow. So then obviously then becomes a thing compared to other countries that I work with, which actually people have to think about these things every day. Like, will I eat tomorrow? Will I get mugged at the corner of my street? Will my family get killed? Will I be kidnapped? Will I be all of those questions that I don't necessarily see them here, and then I understand. Okay, well, if we are going through that, obviously that makes sense that that if you're gonna measure that the idea of happiness because of that, then obviously this gets to be. However, I wanted to finish today's conversation in this Capsulxs. To any of you, do you feel happy? Are you happy? Do you agree with these statements that Finland is the happiest of the countries? So maybe each one of you want to spend a couple of minutes to let us know what are your thoughts on this idea of being happy, if you are happy or not. And I guess you are happy. We are all happy today, of course. But I wonder what your thoughts are on these maybe rankings and things like that.
Well, I mean, it depends what you mean by happiness. Frank Martela has written or even done some videos and stuff about this happiness, what it actually means. And I think it has a lot to do with the absence of reasons for feeling unsafe or unhappy. So basic security and welfare system that even, that even if something happens, if you become unemployed or you have an accident or you're injured or so, then it doesn't mean that you will die, or there's ways to fix it and there's a system that catches you. But and that trust is of course that what makes happy, or at least feeling of safety and social trust in institutions, and trusting that if something bad happens to you, people will believe you. But the thing is that if you're asking us, again, you're asking 3 white women, and there is social trust in institutions looks very different in, for example, communities of color, in migrant communities. We also know that, for example, the European report, Being Black in the EU, from the European Agency for Fundamental Rights, has shown that Finland is one of the most racist country among 12 EU member states. So I think there are a lot of people in Finland who are worried. Will I be harassed today? Will I be attacked today? Will I be, will something bad happen to me today? So I'm not one of those people, I will say that. In most cases, sometimes, being a woman is not always the easiest thing either, but I have a lot of privilege and I feel relatively safe most of the time. Yeah, I would say that that's not true for everybody.
Exactly. I think I was glad to hear that you believe or you think that happiness has been portrayed as equal of safety and social safety, or being safe spaces as a person, and pointed out that although that might be true at some level, there are folks out there, as you mentioned, the immigrants population, they might not feel safe in certain spaces. So the question is, what is these rankings talking about? Who are the ones to get to be happy? Baby, what are your thoughts on this?
That's a very good question. I really agree with Hanna, but there's one thing about, well, that might be my personal opinion, but I think a lot of things would share that in Finnish society in general, well-being is appreciated by, and even, over financial gain, career advancement, material things like that. That's one of the things that helps people to be happy.
Yeah.
But again, it might not apply for all populations, unfortunately.
Nana, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I would also agree that when you have these privileges that we have, that it's kind of hard to maybe see where the problems are in Finnish society. For example, and I do agree that feeling safe and having like basic human needs met, like having housing and food, they are a big part of being happy. And those are like the things that also, when we have interviewed some migrants, that they always bring up like first, like I can feel safe. So that's the thing of happiness. But yeah, everything that Hanna said.
Yeah, looks like we are agreeing on this idea of safety. But one thing to wrap up today's session is well-being, and I think focusing on the idea of well-being every day, that's what makes people happy anywhere in the planet. But for me, if I'm gonna ask the question to myself whether I'm happy here, the answer is yes. But connected with the idea of well-being and do I feel okay and all my needs being met, right? As you mentioned, Sana, like, is it my food here? Am I safe to walk in the streets? Am I safe to be at night? Right? Do I have all my needs covered, so to speak? But beyond that, my happiness comes with the idea of the well-being, but also with the environment and the context where I am with. The place where I'm staying, it's across the lake, and then I have to walk to this university every day through some woods and trees, and there are like birds, and then I have to walk and my face, and I enjoy this moment of facing for 2 minutes or something with the sun in my face and sort of appreciating this moment with the woods and the animals and the water. That makes me happy, and that's something that a lot of people out there, they don't get the chance to live on a regular basis because whoever is happening out there. So for me, I want to thank all of you, Sana, Paivi, and Hannah today for somehow get us on in these conversations about what it means to be and work in Finland, in a country in which many people in the global south want to live so badly and want to mirror so badly, and to understand that there are no either or, there are not binaries here, but there are more different things that we need to discuss in terms of who gets to be happy and what are those who don't necessarily happy, but also the safe spaces that somehow Finland provides to those who come from other places. So thank you so much for coming today. I don't know if you have any other words to wrap up. Otherwise, we give it a close. I don't know if anybody just raise your hand and say, yeah, I want to say something.
No, thank you, Yasin. Thank you all. It was really fun to be part of this.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. And I'll see you next time in another Capsulxs. Bye.
Bye.